Kia ora, ko Barry Milne taku ingoa, he manataki aho ki Campus Research Centre. So I'm Barry, as Natalie mentioned. I'm the director of the Campus Research Centre, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our history of working with Māori communities. As I'll indicate, I don't think we're experts in this area at all. It's kind of happened organically. I think we work slightly differently to the way Natalia has described, where people have approached us because they've known what we've done, or there's been some matchmaking going on, and maybe that's helped the relationships. But if what you get to at a point there is sort of mutual respect, where we understand their aspirations and they understand what we can do, and that leads to a sort of relationship together. So I say there's been no grand plan on this. We cannot be considered experts on this. People ask us, "What have you done?" I'd kind of shrug and say, "Well, people sort of got in touch with us, and we worked with them. We've worked together, well together, and produced something of value to them, and that's kind of how it's worked, and things have spun off along those ways." So yeah, communities approach us because they know, not we know. We know the type of work we can do, but more pertinently, they know the type of research we can do, because through the grapevine and through other reasons, they've found out what we can do. And there's been a lot of matchmaking that's going on. So we have worked for many years with Andrew Spall on a number of different projects, going back to the NatMenco, maybe even before that, actually, that Martin talked about before. Māori Muru Landing, who's director of the James Hennedy Research Centre at the University of Auckland. And we're kind of in similar positions at the University of Auckland, being directors of research centre. So we have a bond, and Manum has been really helpful, sort of connecting us with communities, as I'll get on to. And Sue Kringle is another person who we've had a long history of working with in the sort of primary care space, and from time to time gets in touch with us and says, "Hey, would you like to work together on these things?" So that's happened a lot. And I've mentioned this a little bit, but I think some key things that has involved is just the building of relationships with these groups. So we've had these relationships with these researchers, or who are the sort of connections between us and the research communities. And over time, we've built relationships ourselves. I should also say that we've never, for a long time at least, had a Māori researcher directly as part of Compass. We had Lara Greaves for a couple of years, but she's moved on to bigger and better things. And so we've always had to work with people to then work with Māori communities. And that's actually worked well. I think we've done okay. We've approached it from a mana tauriti perspective. So we're on equal footing with them. So it's not, as Natalia kind of mentioned, sort of researchers going to communities, and it's sometimes talked about as an extractive industry research sometimes. And I don't think we've approached it from that respect. And also, I think, and this has become more of an issue, not for us so much, but it's become more issue societally, is the mana raronga, sort of data sovereignty issue. So when and I'll double up a little bit on what Martin has talked about here in terms of surveys. When we've worked on surveys with Māori communities, the data are theirs. So even though we collect the data and it does pass through the University of Auckland, there's no good reason for us to hold on to it. It's their data, and that should be respected. Okay, so I'll just work through kind of an example about how organically things have spun off for us and working with Māori communities. So Marama Muru Landing, who I mentioned before, she, through her connections with the Waikato, she's Tainui, Waikato Tainui, she linked us with Rukamoana Schaffhausen, who worked with Ngāti Hawa Iwi Trust, and Martin talked about that before, and we worked together with her and Tasha Hoaya to design a survey to understand the sort of housing needs of their iwi group, so the Papakainga survey. And from that happened, and then, I don't know, a year, 18 months after that, I think Tasha, in fact, got in touch with us again and say, "Hey, I work with this group called Te Pairoa, and they would like to engage you to work again with Māori communities." And so she put us in touch with Kitty Marsh Solomon, who works at Te Pairoa, and she wanted us to do, well, she had links with two groups who wanted to do surveys. One was the survey of 150 in the end Māori creative that Martin talked about before, and also the Te Rarawa Iwi in Te Takarau, They wanted to run a sort of whenua survey of their region, and that didn't pan out. But those connections were made, and who knows, maybe something will happen in the future. But we then at that point have had connections with Te Paeroa. And so about a couple of weeks ago, Kitty got in touch again saying, hey, ACC is funding some work to understand why iwi and Tito Takurau are not using ACC services at the rate that you would expect. And so we're just going through contracting at the moment to do work in that area. So that's so this is an approach. This is sort of the way that things have happened, but it's kind of worked well. And they, so the first 2/3 of that slide is about how we can do surveys. The last bit is because in working with us, Kitty's found out we also do, work with whole population. We do more work with whole population data than we do with surveys. And so other work we've done, and Martin touched on some of the things as well. We did some demographic and economic trends for Ngāi Tahu, and that I think spun out because Robin McIntosh, who was working with Ngāi Tahu at the time, got in touch with us. Again, word of mouth, people they knew the work that we could do. Martin, Roy, and I, Roy used to work at Compass, went down to meet with them in Christchurch and talk through what they wanted. Te kaha o ngā rangatahi ki Tamaki Makaurau. So that was work where Andrew Spall said, who knew people at the Independent Māori Statutory Board at Auckland Council, and they wanted to basically understand Māori in the Auckland region by using the whole population data set. And so we put together a report for them. And again, through Andrew Spall, he connected us with Kaukori Baker at Ministry of Social Development, and did a couple of things there. One actually with Lara Griggs as well, to see if a tikanga strength-based index of Māori community wellbeing could be developed using the data that exists, that we're experts in. Turns out our conclusions from that report was, we don't think you can do it with the data that exists. You really have to collect new data from communities to do this. But anyway, and there was the Ngāti Whātua Rake survey as well, and a few other bits and pieces that were done. So again, as I say, not especially that we've got a grand plan of how we do this work, but it's kind of worked okay for us, and I think we have connections with communities now. And sometimes I think that sort of organic development of connections and building up a relationship in so doing is the way that these things can pan out best. Ethnic misclassification in Southern District Health Board, Sue Kringle got in touch with us, and she wanted to understand the extent to which Māori were being undercounted essentially in health data sets. And there's been a bit of research out on that last couple of years actually, in the whole population of New Zealand, but she was specifically interested in the Southern District Health Board. She's now living in Invercargill and working there. But yeah, so this is how we've worked with Māori communities over the years.